Imagine being forced to sell your dream company, the one you poured your heart and soul into building, to your biggest rival. Not because they offered a fair price out of the blue, but because they systematically, deliberately, tried to bankrupt you first, driving your prices down until acquisition was your only lifeline. That's not a hypothetical business school case study. That's just one of the chilling stories from inside Dana Mattioli's explosive investigation, The Everything War. We all see the Amazon boxes, with the Smile logo, arriving daily. We appreciate the convenience, the speed, the sheer selection. One click, and almost anything appears at our doorstep. But behind that smile, in boardrooms, on Main Street, among startups brimming with innovation, Amazon inspires a different emotion. Fear. Fear of competition, fear of acquisition, fear of being rendered obsolete by a company that seems to play by different rules. Today, on CEO's Library, the 1% bookshelf, we're adding a critical volume to your strategic arsenal. Dana Mattioli's The Everything War, How Amazon Prime Subjugated Minneapolis and Triggered the Antitrust Boom. Mattioli, an award-winning investigative reporter for the Wall Street Journal, spent years digging deep into Amazon's practices, revealing a playbook far more complex and perhaps far more ruthless than many realize. This isn't just another tech success story celebrating disruption. This is an X-ray of modern corporate power. Today, we're dissecting this crucial book. We'll uncover the core strategies behind Amazon's relentless, seemingly unstoppable growth, exploring the unique Bezos way thinking that prioritize dominance above all else. We will reveal the controversial, often brutal tactics deployed against competitors, partners, and even its own sellers. And we'll examine the massive antitrust storm that Amazon's success has finally unleashed, a storm that could reshape the entire tech landscape. By the end of this episode, you won't just understand the playbook of a modern titan, you'll gain actionable insights for navigating today's hyper-competitive, platform-dominated landscape. Whether you compete with, partner with, or simply exist within the same economic ecosystem as giants like Amazon, understanding their offense is critical to building your own defense, or crafting a smarter offense. This is about survival and strategy in the age of the everything war. How did a company that famously lost money for years, perplexing Wall Street analysts accustomed to quarterly earnings beats, become one of the most valuable and powerful corporations on the planet? Was Amazon just incredibly lucky, riding the perfect wave of the internet boom? Or was there a deliberate, almost ruthless, formula baked in from day one? The story often starts with Jeff Bezos leaving a lucrative job on Wall Street, driving cross-country, famously sketching out a business plan focused initially on books. But Mattioli reveals it was never just about books. The first core insight from The Everything War is the radical prioritization of growth over profits. In an era where Wall Street typically punished companies for red ink, Bezos convinced investors to bet on his long-term vision, achieve massive scale first, capture market share, become indispensable, and then, eventually, the profits would follow. This was revolutionary. He articulated this clearly in his 1997 letter to shareholders, a document now considered legendary, stating it was day one for the internet and for Amazon, emphasizing long-term thinking and investment over short-term profitability. The book highlights how Wall Street, particularly certain influential analysts, bought into this narrative, granting Amazon access to capital and a level of tolerance for losses that most competitors simply couldn't fathom, let alone replicate. This wasn't just patience. Mattioli hints at a kind of valuation paradox, where the more Amazon grew and promised future dominance, the more investors rewarded it, enabling further aggressive expansion. Second, Mattioli exposes how Amazon strategically exploited existing loopholes, practicing a form of systemic arbitrage. The most significant early example was the sales tax loophole. Before 2018, online retailers often didn't have to collect sales tax in states where they lacked a physical presence. Amazon weaponized this by strategically locating its early warehouses and headquarters, choosing Seattle, for instance, partly for its pool of tech talent, but also its relatively small population base, minimizing the number of customers initially subject to sales tax. Amazon gained a significant price advantage over brick-and-mortar retailers who had to charge sales tax. This wasn't an accidental benefit, it was a calculated move that fueled its early growth, attracting price-sensitive customers and helping it undercut established players. Mattioli details how Amazon fought vigorously, state by state, to maintain this advantage for as long as possible. Third, there was the explicit beachhead strategy. Books were merely the starting point, chosen for their uniformity, ease of shipping, and vast existing catalog. Bezos's vision, documented early on, was always to become the everything store. Books were the wedge to gain customer trust, build logistics, and gather data, paving the way for dominating category after category: electronics, toys, clothing, groceries, and eventually, cloud computing, advertising, and more. Mattioli underscores the killer instinct that Bezos looked for in his early hires, a relentless drive to win, to conquer markets, not just participate in them. This wasn't just about selling products, it was about building an empire. So, what are the applications for leaders listening today? Bezos's approach challenges the tyranny of the quarterly earnings report. It underscores the power of a compelling long-term vision that can persuade stakeholders to invest in future dominance, even at the cost of immediate returns. Leaders should ask, are we sacrificing long-term strategic positioning for short-term gains? How can we better articulate and sell our long-term vision? Furthermore, Mattioli's account highlights the importance of identifying and leveraging systemic advantages or arbitrage opportunities. While the sales tax loophole is now closed, analogous opportunities might exist in regulations, technological shifts, or market inefficiencies. The key is to find these ethically and strategically. How can your business find unique leverage points within the current system? Finally, the beachhead strategy emphasizes focus. Start small, dominate a niche, build capabilities, and then expand methodically. Compare this to companies like early cable operators, who invested heavily in infrastructure for future returns, or Tesla, which focused initially on a high-end niche before aiming for mass market adoption, instilling a clear, potentially counterintuitive, long-term vision, identifying unique systemic advantages, and executing a focused beachhead strategy. These were key elements of Amazon's Genesis formula. Now, think about Amazon's diverse operations. You have the massive online retail store. You have Amazon Web Services, the dominant cloud computing platform. You have a burgeoning advertising business. You have a sophisticated global logistics network, rivaling FedEx and UPS. You have devices like Alexa and Kindle embedded in millions of homes. Are these just separate, successful ventures that happen to share a parent company? Or, as the Everything War meticulously details, are they interconnected cogs in a perfectly engineered machine, a self-reinforcing system designed for total dominance? Bezos aimed to make Amazon a daily habit, inseparable from consumers' lives. Mattioli provides one of the clearest journalistic explanations of Amazon's famous flywheel, a concept originally popularized by Jim Collins, but taken to an unparalleled level by Amazon. It works like this. Amazon started by inviting third-party sellers onto its marketplace. This dramatically increased selection, drawing more customers to the site. More customers made the marketplace more attractive to even more sellers. This created a virtuous cycle. To improve the customer experience, Amazon introduced Prime, offering fast, free shipping for a subscription fee, locking customers in. To handle the logistics for itself and its sellers, it built Fulfillment by Amazon, or FBA, turning its cost center, warehousing and shipping, into a revenue stream, and further integrating sellers into its ecosystem. The massive computing infrastructure needed to run this sprawling operation was then productized into Amazon Web Services, AWS. The vast amounts of customer data generated across retail, Prime, and devices fueled targeted advertising on its platform, creating another lucrative business. The profits from high-margin businesses like AWS and advertising could then be reinvested into lowering prices in retail, funding Prime benefits, expanding logistics faster, and developing new devices, further accelerating the entire flywheel. Each part feeds and strengthens the others, creating immense barriers to entry and locking both customers and sellers deeper into the Amazon ecosystem. A critical insight from the book is the role of AWS as the profit engine. For years, Amazon's retail operation ran on razor-thin margins, or even at a loss in many areas. Competitors relying solely on retail profits couldn't possibly match Amazon's aggressive pricing, rapid expansion, and heavy investment in logistics and technology. AWS, generating billions in high-margin revenue, effectively subsidized the retail empire's growth and conquest. Mattioli argues this gave Amazon an almost unassailable advantage, allowing it to wage wars of attrition against competitors who lacked a similar diversified profit stream. It could afford to lose money longer than anyone else to gain market share. And the linchpin holding this entire structure together? Data. The Everything War emphasizes how data flows seamlessly between Amazon's seemingly disparate businesses, providing unparalleled market intelligence and leverage. Amazon knows what customers search for, what they buy, what they watch on Prime Video, what they ask Alexa, which sellers are successful, what products are trending, and what prices the market will bear. This data informs everything from inventory management and product development, including its own private label brands like Amazon Basics, to advertising targeting and AWS service offerings. Devices like Kindle and Echo aren't just convenient gadgets, they are sophisticated data conduits, extending Amazon's reach directly into consumers' homes and daily routines, perpetually feeding the flywheel. The implications for executives are profound. First, can you identify potential flywheels within your own business? What virtuous cycles could you create where different parts of your operations reinforce each other? Think about how customer acquisition, product development, service delivery, and data generation can connect and accelerate. Second, consider Amazon's AWS example. Are there core competencies or internal services within your company that could be productized and offered externally, creating new revenue streams and reinforcing your core business? Many companies have internal IT, logistics, or data analytics capabilities that might have broader market potential. Third, adopt ecosystem thinking. Break down internal silos. How can different business units collaborate, share data appropriately and ethically, and create synergistic value rather than operating independently? Finally, the success of Prime underscores the strategic value of subscription models. They generate recurring revenue, increase customer loyalty, or lock-in, and provide a consistent stream of valuable behavioral data. Can you build a compelling membership or subscription offering around your products or services? Understanding and potentially replicating elements of Amazon's flywheel and ecosystem strategy is crucial for building a resilient and growing business today. As Jim Collins noted, flywheels take time and consistent effort to build, but once they gain momentum, they are incredibly powerful. Amazon is perhaps the ultimate example. But how did Amazon deploy this powerful machine against its rivals? What happens when the everything store decides it wants your everything? Mattioli's investigation moves beyond strategy into the controversial tactics Amazon allegedly used to neutralize threats and conquer markets. We'll look at the stories of companies like Quidsi, the parent company of diapers.com, startups wooed by the Alexa Fund, thinking they'd found a powerful partner, and countless third-party sellers who saw their successful products effectively cloned by Amazon's own brands. Is this just hyper-aggressive, bare-knuckle competition, the kind any ambitious company practices? Or, as Mattioli's sources suggest, does it cross a line into something more predatory, something potentially illegal? Let's start with the infamous story of Quidsi, detailed vividly in the book. In the late 2000s, diapers.com was a fast-growing, venture-backed online retailer, successfully competing with Amazon in the baby care category. Amazon identified it as a threat. According to Mattioli's reporting, Amazon launched a targeted campaign. It dramatically slashed prices on diapers and other baby products, reportedly monitoring diapers.com's prices and automatically undercutting them. even if it meant losing millions of dollars per month. One estimate cited was $100 million over 3 months. This aggressive, below-cost pricing squeezed Quidsi relentlessly. Simultaneously, Amazon reportedly signaled its intent to launch Amazon Mom, a direct competitor program. Facing immense financial pressure and the prospect of a prolonged and sustainable price war against a much larger rival willing to burn cash, Quidsi felt it had little choice but to sell to Amazon in 2010 for about $545 million. To many observers, detailed by Mattioli, this wasn't just competition, it was predatory pricing, designed explicitly to eliminate or forcibly acquire a competitor. Amazon could sustain losses that Quidsi simply couldn't, thanks in part to profits from segments like AW. Beyond direct acquisitions, the Everything War delves into how Amazon allegedly weaponized its own platform against the third-party sellers crucial to its flywheel. While Marketplace offered sellers access to a massive customer base, it came at a steep price. Mattioli documents escalating commission fees, pressure to use Amazon's expensive FBA service, which often boosted a product's visibility in search results and eligibility for the crucial buy box, and the necessity of buying advertising on Amazon just to be seen, even by customers searching for a seller's specific brand name. Sellers became increasingly dependent, operating under constant fear of policy changes or account suspension. The book also touches upon the persistent problem of counterfeit goods on the platform, suggesting Amazon's focus on frictionless seller onboarding and growth sometimes came at the expense of effective policing, hurting legitimate brands. Perhaps the most explosive allegations concern copying and cloning. Mattioli recounts stories from numerous sellers who claim Amazon used proprietary data gleaned from their sales on its marketplace, data about pricing, popular features, manufacturing costs, to develop and launch competing products under its Amazon Basics or other private labels. Suddenly, a seller's successful product would face a near-identical competitor, often priced lower and promoted heavily by Amazon itself, sometimes even appearing higher in search results. The book also details troubling experiences of tech startups. Companies like Ubi, Nucleus, and Doppler Labs engaged with Amazon, sometimes sharing confidential information and intellectual property through partnerships, corporate development talks, or the Alexa Fund, Amazon's venture capital arm, meant to encourage Alexa skills and devices. Later, they were shocked to see Amazon launch strikingly similar products, effectively competing with the very innovators it had courted. Mattioli highlights the potentially problematic residuals clause, often found in Amazon's non-disclosure agreements, which critics argue gives Amazon broad license to use information learned during such discussions. What are the takeaways here for leaders? Firstly, the ethical lines in competitive intelligence and strategy can be blurry, but the examples in the book serve as cautionary tales. Predatory pricing and misappropriating partner data may lead to short-term wins, but invite long-term legal and reputational risks. Secondly, for businesses competing either on Amazon's platform or against it in the broader market, diversification and building your own brand equity are crucial. Reduce platform dependency where possible. Invest in direct customer relationships, alternative sales channels, and securing intellectual property. Thirdly, be incredibly cautious when partnering with or taking investment from dominant platform companies, especially if your core business relies on innovation they might replicate. Understand the terms, particularly around information sharing and intellectual property. Mattioli draws parallels to the tactics used by historical monopolies, like Standard Oil, suggesting these aggressive maneuvers are not entirely new, just adapted for the digital age. The concept of competition, where companies cooperate in some areas and compete in others, becomes particularly dangerous when there's a massive power imbalance, as the smaller party risks being exploited or eliminated. Protecting yourself requires vigilance, strategic diversification, and robust legal safeguards. Amazon's relentless expansion and aggressive tactics eventually triggered a backlash. A sleeping giant, antitrust enforcement, began to stir, fueled by academic critiques, journalistic investigations like Mattioli's, competitor complaints, and growing unease across the political spectrum about the concentrated power of big tech. From a relatively obscure Yale Law Journal paper by a then student named Lina Khan going viral, to tense hearings in the halls of Congress, culminating in a massive lawsuit filed by the Federal Trade Commission, the world started pushing back. How did Amazon's self-proclaimed everything war ignite this new antitrust boom? And what does this regulatory reckoning mean for the future of business? Mattioli chronicles the rise of what's often called neo-Brandasian antitrust thinking, named after Justice Louis Brandeis, an earlier critic of corporate monopolies. For decades, U.S. antitrust enforcement primarily focused on the consumer welfare standard, largely interpreted as meaning interventions were only warranted if corporate consolidation or conduct led to higher prices for consumers. Lina Khan's influential article, Amazon's Antitrust Paradox, argued this standard was inadequate for the digital age. She contended that platform giants like Amazon could wield immense power, harming competitors, suppliers, and innovation itself, even while keeping consumer prices low, sometimes artificially low, funded by other business lines. This argument resonated deeply, first in academic circles, then among policymakers and regulators. Mattioli shows how Khan's ideas gained traction, eventually leading to her appointment as chair of the FTC, signaling a major shift in regulatory philosophy. Notably, concerns about big tech's power became one of the few areas of bipartisan agreement in Washington. Facing this mounting pressure, Amazon initially tried to maintain a low profile in Washington, D.C., but as the scrutiny intensified, it dramatically ramped up its lobbying efforts. The Everything War details Amazon's evolving D.C. playbook, pouring hundreds of millions into lobbying and campaign contributions, hiring well-connected insiders from both political parties, emphasizing its job creation numbers and investments across congressional districts, a strategy Mattioli calls watering the flowers, and attempting to mobilize its vast base of third-party sellers as political advocates. Amazon also tried to control the narrative through public relations, though sometimes clumsy attempts, like aggressive tweets from corporate accounts attacking critics, backfired. The complexity of Jeff Bezos's personal ownership of the Washington Post, a major news outlet covering Amazon and the government, added another layer to this dynamic, raising questions Mattioli explores carefully. The culmination of this building pressure was the landmark lawsuit filed by the FTC and 17 state attorneys general in September 2023. Mattioli breaks down the core allegations that Amazon illegally maintains monopoly power in the online superstore market and the market for online marketplace services. The suit alleges Amazon coerces sellers into using its costly FBA logistics service by effectively punishing those who don't, with lower visibility on the platform. It also claims Amazon pressures sellers into using its advertising services, further driving up costs that are ultimately passed on to consumers. Another key allegation involves anti-discounting measures that prevent sellers from offering lower prices on other websites, allegedly inflating prices across the internet. The lawsuit even mentions a secret Amazon algorithm internally codenamed Project Nessie, allegedly designed to identify how much Amazon could raise prices and still keep its competitors from gaining market share. Furthermore, the FTC accused Amazon executives, including Bezos himself, of attempting to obstruct the investigation by using ephemeral messaging apps like Signal for key communications and failing to preserve relevant documents. What does this mean for business leaders? Firstly, the regulatory landscape, especially regarding competition and platform power, is shifting globally. Companies, particularly large ones, or those operating in concentrated markets, need to anticipate and prepare for increased antitrust scrutiny. Practices once considered merely aggressive might now be viewed as anti-competitive. Secondly, having a coherent, proactive, and measured public policy and communications strategy is no longer optional for major corporations. It's essential. Navigating regulatory challenges requires sophisticated engagement, transparency, where possible, and avoiding costly missteps in public discourse. Thirdly, it's crucial to monitor international developments. Mattioli notes that European regulators often moved against big tech companies, including Amazon, earlier and more aggressively than their US counterparts, providing potential previews of enforcement trends. The potential outcomes of the FTC case against Amazon range from fines and behavioral remedies, forcing changes in how Amazon operates its marketplace or treats sellers, to most drastically a potential breakup of the company, perhaps separating AWS from the retail operations, though that remains a complex and uncertain prospect. Understanding this evolving regulatory environment is now a critical leadership competency. So, we've journeyed through the core of the everything war. We saw Amazon's calculated genesis, leveraging unique advantages like Wall Street's patience and regulatory loopholes, driven by a relentless focus on long-term growth. We dissected the powerful flywheel effect, an intricate ecosystem where retail, cloud, advertising, and logistics synergize to create unparalleled dominance and data capture. We confronted the controversial tactics, the alleged predatory pricing, platform weaponization, and cloning of competitor products that left a trail of disrupted businesses and bruised innovators. And finally, we arrived at the ongoing antitrust reckoning, a global pushback challenging the very foundations of Amazon's empire. Dana Mattioli's meticulously reported book paints a picture of a company built on an obsession with the customer, delivering undeniable convenience and value, yet seemingly achieving this dominance at the expense of almost everything else in its path: competitors, partners, sometimes even the integrity of its own marketplace. The Everything War is not just a history of Amazon. It's a crucial analysis of 21st century capitalism, platform power, and the evolving rules of competition. It's essential reading, a definitive volume for the 1% bookshelf. What lessons will you take away? How does Amazon's playbook inform your own strategy, your competitive analysis, your approach to partnerships, your understanding of ethical boundaries? How do the dynamics Mattioli reveals impact your industry, your company, your leadership? We encourage you to reflect on these questions. To dive deeper, visit ceoslibrary.com for a full transcript of this episode, accompanying visualizations of concepts like the flywheel and useful links. If you found this dissection valuable, please share it with fellow leaders, executives, and entrepreneurs in your network who need to understand these forces. And be sure to subscribe to CEO's Library for more deep dives into the books shaping the future of business. Our final question for you today, prompted by Mattioli's work: does Amazon's story represent the inevitable future of business in the digital age, a model to be emulated for its sheer effectiveness? Or is it a cautionary tale, a model whose impact on competition and society necessitates fundamental change? This episode provides a deep dive into the strategies and controversies detailed in Dana Mattioli's The Everything War. To explore these concepts further and get the full context, we encourage you to purchase the complete book. You can find the Amazon link to buy a copy of the book or the audiobook in the episode description.